So the 50 series is out and it's more expensive than ever. So today I figured I'd show you how to take advantage of the 50 series release without spending a dime. This is quite literally like downloading a new graphics card for free. Stay tuned. So, with the release of the 50 series, we all get to sit around and watch videos about how amazing it is, and also how buying one will probably require a second mortgage. You know, a second mortgage on a house that might burn down, considering they're having even more problems with the new 12-volt power adapter. But luckily, with the 50 series comes DLSS 4, and that's going to be supported on all RTX cards across the board. At least, the transformer model portion of DLSS 4 will be. But the problem is, no games support it yet. Even the list of supported games don't actually support it yet. So we're stuck with Cyberpunk and Indiana Jones. But what if I told you that you can take advantage of DLSS 4 on any game that supports DLSS? And the benefits are pretty good. That's what we're talking about today. But first, I gotta pay some bills. So check out today's sponsor. Is your copy of Windows 10 unactivated? Well, it doesn't have to be, because with today's sponsor, VIP-SCDKey, you can get a valid Windows 10 license for under $20. Stop dealing with that stupid watermark on the desktop, the valid license for Windows 10. Also, with an activated copy of Windows 10, you can upgrade to Windows 11 for free. Just go to the link in the description below and pick up a valid Windows 10 license key. During checkout, use the code CyberCPU for a 25% discount. Once you have your key, go to your activation settings in Windows 10 and click on the link that says Change Product Key. Enter the product key you just purchased and hit Activate. Now you don't have to deal with that stupid watermark that come with running an unactivated copy of Windows 10. Now, on with the video. DLSS stands for Deep Learning Supersampling. The idea behind it is to allow the GPU to render a lower resolution image and then use machine learning to upscale that image to match your monitor's resolution. And it's supposed to happen without a huge loss in quality. For instance, if you have a monitor that's 1440p, DLSS will allow you to render the game at 1080p, but display it on the monitor at 1440 and look the same as if it would have been natively rendered at 1440. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. DLSS has been with us for quite some time. It was first introduced alongside the RTX 20 series cards, and it had fairly mixed reviews. You see, the problem is when you render an image at a lower resolution and then upscale it, chances are you're going to get a worse image than you would have had if it was just rendered at the native resolution, like what you're seeing right now. However, DLSS isn't just upscaling a low resolution image like I just did. Instead, it's using the tensor cores on RTX GPUs to intelligently upscale an image using AI. The original version of DLSS required each game to be individually trained, and the results were not fantastic. I mean, it was better than just upscaling a lower resolution image, but it still had lots of issues when compared to natively rendered frames. Luckily though, as DLSS has advanced, image quality has advanced as well. With each new version of DLSS, the image quality has gotten even better than the version before. Also, since DLSS 2, it's no longer required to train the model on each game individually. And now with the release of DLSS 4, the image quality is better than ever, and in some cases, indistinguishable from native frames. In fact, that's what led to me making this video in the first place. Many people are reporting that running DLSS 4 in performance mode will result in the same or better quality than DLSS 3 in quality mode. The different DLSS modes are like quality or performance essentially use different starting resolutions. So if your target resolution is 1440p, the performance mode will render the image at 1080p and then just upscale it to 1440. The quality mode, on the other hand, will render render it at a higher resolution than 1080p and then upscale it to 1440. So the final image will be better than the quality mode because the upscaler doesn't have to scale it as high as it does with the performance mode. So if it's true that image quality on the performance mode of DLSS 4 is as good or better than the performance mode of DLSS 3, then this should ultimately not only give you better frame rates, but a higher quality image as well. At least that's what my theory was. But first, we need some games to test it on other than Cyberpunk and Indiana Jones. I mean, yes, we're going to test it on Cyberpunk, but no, I am not spending $80 on Indiana Jones. I'm definitely going to have to wait for Steam to go on a sale on that before I get a copy. And it's going to have to be a really good sale because come on, that's ridiculous. Who spends $80 on a game? So instead, I'm going to show you a cool little utility that will allow you to switch the DLSS version of any game that you have installed on your system. The name of this utility is called DLSS Swapper. Essentially, all it does is change the DLSS DLLs in the game directory to the DLLs for whatever version of DLSS you want the game to use. Now, you can do this manually, but by using this utility, it downloads the DLLs for you and it saves the original DLLs so you can restore them back if you have issues. So let's jump on the system real quick and I'll show you how to install it and use it. Okay, so I'm going to be doing this on Windows 11. However, you should be able to do this on Windows 10 or 11 and you should have the same results, but I've only tested it on Windows 11. So the first thing you need to do is go to GitHub to the DLSS Swapper page. Now this is a free utility and it's open source as well, so you can go through it, see how it works if you want to, or you can just download it and use it like I do. So to download it, you go right here to releases, click on latest, and it looks like the latest one was released 4 days before filming this video. And then you can either install the portable version or the installer. Now, I've tried both of them. I'm going to do the installer this time, but you guys know how much I like portable programs. However, with this one right here, because of the nature of the program itself, I think an installer would probably be better for this program. So that's what I'm going to install. So as soon as it downloads, go ahead and click on it and open it up in your downloads directory. We can go ahead and close our browser window here and just install the program like normal. Now, it's going to give you one of these Windows protection errors when you start. So just go ahead and say run anyway, and it should install the program. And then just go through the steps. There shouldn't be anything special you need to do to install it. Just install it like you would install any program. And it should just take a second, and there we go. Now to start the program, all we have to do is go over to or actually we can go to our recommended here, or we can click on all and scroll down to DLSS Swapper inside of the start menu. Hit OK for the warning for multiplayer games, and then give it a second, and it should go through and detect all the games that you currently have installed in your system. And as you can see, down by the corner, if DLSS is available on the game, it'll tell you the version of DLSS that it's using. If it's not, then it'll just say NA. Now, of course, this isn't going to work on any game that doesn't already support DLSS. So you have to have a game that uses DLSS for you to be able to use this. So a lot of games on here, as you can see, don't support it. But if you go down here, you can see which games are using which versions of DLSS by the version number in the right-hand corner. Now, one of the games that we're testing today is Red Dead Redemption 2. So that's the one that I'll use for an example. So if you want to change the DLSS version, you just click on the game and it'll open up this little utility here and it'll tell you which parts of DLSS the game actually supports. So Red Dead Redemption 2 does not support frame generation. So it doesn't have a way to be able to switch the version for frame generation. It only supports regular DLSS and that's it. So when you click on that, it'll give you a whole list of all different versions of DLSS that you can use to switch to. If you wanted to, you could even go to an earlier version of DLSS if you wanted to, but I'm not sure why you would want to. So if we scroll all the way up, DLSS 4 is version 310.1. I'm not sure why it's 310.1 and not version 4, but that's the way it is. This little arrow right here will tell you that it requires a download. So when you click on it and you push swap, it has to download it first before it can swap it. And then once it downloads it, you can push swap and you're good to go. And as you can see, now we're using DLSS 4. So if we close this, you can see on the corner right here, it's changed from DLSS 2.2 like it had before to version 3.10.1.0.0, which is DLSS 4. Now, this utility worked for me on all the games that I tested it on. So if the game that you're trying is on the list that you just saw, then chances are it'll work fine. But there is a chance that this could make your game unstable, unfortunately. But I didn't experience that with all the games that I tested it on. There's another downside too, though. This utility doesn't change the game's UI in any way whatsoever. Since different versions of DLSS have different options, those options are not going to be available within the game's UI. So now that we have some games that we can compare DLSS versions on, let's take a look at how a few different games look and perform between different DLSS versions and DLSS 4. The system that I did all these tests on was the Ryzen 5 5600 gaming system that I built a few weeks ago. It has 16 gigs of DDR 3200 and an EVGA RTX 3070. All the tests were done at 1440p with the settings on either high or ultra, because the goal of this test isn't just better frame rates, but also better image quality. So, let's see how they did. The first game we're looking at is Cyberpunk. This is the only game that we're testing today that natively supports both the CN model of DLSS 3 as well as the Transformer model of DLSS 4. So we can switch between them in the game settings. As you can see from this still here, on the DLSS 3 CN model, the lighting looks a little blown out right around these areas right here. Unfortunately, it's obscured from the smoke effect in the bar, but the areas that don't have the smoke, like the sign right here and the sign right here, you can see a clear difference on the right with the DLSS 4 Transformer model, where the lighting looks more natural. And you can see that through the other lighting as we move through this scene. And then coming through this door right here, to the end of this little room, here you can see the difference in detail on the door. The lines on the door on the DLSS 3 CN model don't look quite right. And look at this vending machine right here, as well as the HVAC system up on the roof. It definitely looks sharper on the Transformer model of DLSS 4. Now, moving through the door, going to the outside, I just have to say that Cyberpunk does an amazing job with ray tracing. The game is just fun to look at. As we're moving through this alleyway, you can see subtle differences between the DLSS 3 CN model and the DLSS 4 Transformer model. Most of these differences, to me, look like slight variations in lighting, where the DLSS 3 lighting looks just slightly more blown out than the DLSS 4. But honestly, this might be just me nitpicking, and it's extremely subtle. Now, one way to really tell the difference between different upscale methods is when you look at organic things like these palm trees right here. However, I don't see much difference between the two. However, the DLSS 3 might have a little bit more blurry spot kind of near the edges of the palm leaves, from like right here to right here. Ultimately, they both look pretty good. But now that we know how it looks, how much more overhead did it take to get that? Because nothing's free, right? On the DLSS 3 CN model, we got an average FPS of 53.9 with a 1% low of 43.3. Once switching to the DLSS 4 Transformer model, we got an average frame rate of 70.4 with a 1% low of 53.7. That's a 26.5% improvement in our average frame rate and a 21.4% improvement on our 1% low. So, not only did we get slightly better image quality, but we also got considerably more performance. Now, moving on to the next game we're looking at is Red Dead Redemption 2. This required DLSS swapper to enable DLSS 4. Natively, Red Dead Redemption supports DLSS 2.2. So this is going to be a pretty good test between the differences between an even older version of DLSS and DLSS 4. Now, right off the bat, if you take a look at the differences between the CN and Transformer model, it's night and day. Over here on the DLSS 2.0 side, you can see artifacting around the edges of everything that has a high contrast edge, like right here on the power pole, as well as across the roof and the chimney stacks right here. You can see this edge really pronounced. Now, if you look over on the right-hand side, we don't see the same artifacting in the same spots that we do on the left-hand side. the right-hand side looks much more natural. This is a really common problem with upscaling that it looks like the transformer model has solved. Now moving along, let's take a look really close at the lighting because I think you can still see the subtle differences that we saw in Cyberpunk, also in Red Dead Redemption. The lighting on the DLSS 2.2 looks a little bit more blown out than the lighting on the transformer model in the DLSS 4, but it's really subtle, and honestly, it might come down to just my subjective preference. Now here we have Arthur robbing this poor store clerk. Keep an eye out for the same artifacting around high contrast edges. In fact, as he moves around the corner, let me stop right here. Look at these framed pictures on the back wall. You can clearly see the artifacting on the left with the DLSS 2, and it's gone on the right with DLSS 4. You can also see the artifacting around the clerk's head where it's contrasting with the shadows on the back. This is something I've never noticed before in Red Dead Redemption 2, but now that I've seen it, I can't unsee it. I literally see it everywhere now. In fact, especially as Arthur moves around, let him go through this door real quick. Here you can see him running down the street. You can clearly see the artifacting around his hat whenever it contrasts with the background. Just look at it for a minute as he's moving around. Every time the background is lighter than his hat is, you can see the artifacting that we just saw before, and it's pretty pronounced. In fact, let's stop it right here so we can zoom in a little bit and see what I'm talking about. If you look at every single edge, whether it be around Arthur's hat or even around his jacket and satchel, you can see the same artifacting. But over on the right-hand side, on DLSS 4, all that artifacting is gone, and the lines between the light and dark contrasting areas of the hat look natural like they should. I honestly don't think I'll be able to play Red Dead Redemption 2 without swapping to DLSS 4. So surely this is a way better improvement than we saw with Cyberpunk. There has to be a substantial performance cost, right? Well, if you've been paying attention, the frame rate was playing at the bottom of the screen the whole time. And no, there wasn't a frame rate cost. With DLSS 2.2, we got an average FPS of 109.4 and a 1% low of 69.6. When switching to DLSS 4, we got an average frame rate of 115.1 with a 1% low of 71.2. That's a 5.1% improvement in our average frame rate and a 2.3% improvement in our 1% low. Now, we didn't get anywhere near as big of an improvement as we did in Cyberpunk, but we did get a better frame rate and we did get better frame timings. This might be due to the fact that Cyberpunk natively supports DLSS 4, while Red Dead Redemption does not. Maybe if Rockstar would optimize it for DLSS 4, we could see even better performance increases. But even though we got a lower performance increase, we definitely got a way better image quality. Now, moving along, the next game we're looking at is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Shadow of the Tomb Raider natively uses DLSS 2.3. This is another game that we need to use DLSS swapper in order to enable DLSS 4. Now, one of the biggest changes that I've noticed between the CN model and the Transformer model in this game is skin textures. If you look really close at Lara Croft, you can see the slight variations in the texture of her skin, as well as more definition between individual strands of hair. This might be due to the same thing we've been experiencing in other games where the CN model has slightly blown out lighting, where the Transformer model has more realistic lighting. This might be what is causing this change in the skin texture because the DLSS 2 CN model on the left definitely looks slightly more exposed than the lighting on the right with the Transformer model on DLSS 4. Here again, look really close at the hair on Lara Croft. The individual strands of hair on DLSS 4 look slightly more defined than on DLSS 2. Now, I understand that a lot of these are really kind of nitpicking, but we're genuinely trying to look for the difference here between the two models. And again, if we come down here and look at the skin texture, to me, it looks slightly more natural on DLSS 4 than it does on DLSS 2, with the DLSS 2 looking slightly overexposed. So ultimately, I think this game here shows the most subtle differences between the two DLSS versions. I really had to spend a lot of time studying zoomed in screenshots of this game to really see many differences. The differences are definitely there, but they're extremely subtle, and I highly doubt we'll notice them during gameplay. But with that said, what did DLSS 4 do for the performance of this game? Well, that you might actually be able to tell the difference, because with DLSS 2.3, we got an average frame rate of 121.4 and a 1% low of 83.2. Once switching to DLSS 4, we got an average frame rate of 153.2 and a 1% low of 94.7. That's a 23.2% improvement on our average frame rate and a 12.9% improvement on our 1% low. So while the image quality in Shadow of the Tomb Raider isn't improved that substantially with DLSS 4, the performance definitely is. I mean, it's not every day that you can get over a 20% improvement in performance with absolutely no downside. In fact, slightly better image quality. So you might be asking yourself now, how are we getting so much better performance on DLSS 4 than the older versions of DLSS? I mean, the image quality difference makes sense, but how are we getting more performance? Well, the answer to that question comes from what we discussed all the way at the beginning of the video. Many people are reporting that they're seeing the same or better quality on DLSS 4 performance mode than the older DLSS in quality mode. So that's exactly what I tested, and those are the results. Seems like it's confirmed. So yes, there is a substantial performance increase using DLSS 4. And ultimately, you don't even have to do anything aside from upgrading your drivers to take advantage of it. I mean, this right here could be a game changer for people that don't want to spend a ridiculous amount of money on a 50 series card. I mean, I heard that the 5070 was going to be $1,000 plus. I mean, the 750 that they claim, apparently just isn't a thing. So it might be a good idea to just do something like this to allow your current card to last you until maybe the 60 series. Maybe NVIDIA will wake up and charge a little bit less. I don't know. This is one way to find out. Yes, on some older games, you may have to use a utility like DLSS Swapper, but even if you don't want to do that, a lot of these games will hopefully be updated to the latest version of DLSS at some point. And when or if that happens, we should be able to see even better performance improvements in these games simply because of the fact that the developers can optimize the game to take advantage of DLSS 4. Now, if you want even more free performance out of your GPU, then check out this video where I show you how to overclock your GPU. With all of the protections built into modern GPUs, there's really not much downside to overclocking other than temporary instability. But I show you how to manage that in that video there. As always, you guys have a great day.